In this video, I will be covering the topics of if statements. So I will be teaching you something pretty universal that you can use almost everywhere. Now, if statement is basically a chunk of code that checks this or that. And we could check if a value of ours or a scenario of ours would work in different environments. The first way I'll be showing you how to set up an if statement is in JavaScript. Now, the way we would set up an if statement is with an if command followed by some parentheses to show that we are stating a condition. Now, our condition is what we're actually looking for, like if 1 is greater than 2. Now, this is obviously wrong because 1 is obviously less than 2, but if we would use such a thing and we would console.log 1 is greater than 2. Now, the way I would break this down is it checks our condition and then it executes whatever we want to happen if it's true inside these brackets. Basically checks if your condition is true. Now, this is obviously wrong, but what we could do is else if and then enter in another condition followed by whatever we want, like 1 is less than 2. Now, this is right, so what would happen here is it would check if 1 is greater than 2, which is incorrect, it's less than 2. So it would skip past this code and then it will check our else if command. Else if 1 is less than 2. Now, that's true, so we want it to tell us 1 is less than 2. Now, if we run the code in our console, we get 1 is less than 2. We can see that it skipped our 1 is greater than 2 and gave us its true value of 1 being less than 2. There is 3 different ways we can make an if statement. We could use the if command, we could use the else if command, and we can use the else command. If is our first way to check for conditions, and this will always check a certain value, like 2 is greater than 4 or greater than 3. That's not true, so it'll skip over this. It's basically checking if your value is true. Else if you put after an if statement, and else if checks for another set of conditions, but only if our first command was wrong. So if this is true, if 2 was greater than 3, then it would skip our else if because we already have our if statement as true. So it would skip else if and only run our if statement. Now, our last type of if statement is an else command. Now, this takes no commands, no condition, no parameters, and basically what it does is if our first if statement is false, it'll do whatever. So we could say console.log 2 is less than 3, and this would say 2 is greater than 3. Now, because 2 is not actually greater than 3, it'll render this as wrong and it will play whatever we have over here because it was wrong. So 2 is less than 3. That's what we should expect, and that's exactly what we got. Now, you can't just do this with numbers, you can do it with variables too, like if x is greater than 3, and then we would say console.log x is greater than 3, right? Now, let's set up an x, and let's say x was 8. That would be true, right? Yeah, it is greater than 3. But let's say it was 1. 1 is less than 3. So we'll skip over, and we got nothing in the console. Perfect. Another thing you can do for your if statements is if you want to check multiple conditions at once, you don't have to make many if statements inside of each other, resulting in an infinite loop. Something you can do is do like 1 is greater than 0. That's true, so it would obviously show our command, but then we could put and. We put an and symbol just to stand for and. If 1 is greater than 0 and 4 is greater than 5, which wouldn't be true. So 1 is greater than 0, that's true, but this is not true, and we get nothing in our console. However, if we put an or symbol, which is 2 of these lines right here, these straight lines, this is what means or. If 1 is greater than 0 or 4 is greater than 5, well, this is false, but this is true. So it'll still give us our answer and it renders as true. That's how you would do it in JavaScript, and you can basically apply the same principle to everywhere else. And that will wrap it up for our if statement tutorials. If you found this video helpful, make sure you leave a like so others can find videos just like this. And that'll be it. Goodbye.